lonely. I can fix that. You look lonely. I can fix that.
Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. Hopefully my voice is loud and clear. Before I begin, I wanted to say that all sorts of questions during this live stream are welcome. And keep in mind, I'm just some person in a universe of a billion trillion stars talking. And also, for those interested in engaging the project further, there's a membership option with project supporter meetings. And so these are the announcements, and now we go in. So in this episode, I thought of attempting to provide a sort of commentary on how I have perceived philosophy, and also a commentary on the loud noises of vehicles. So I would start from here that actually in this episode I'm introducing a new concept. And it's something that it's a word that I haven't heard anyone else use, believe it or not. I think, at least in my own reality, I'm the first.
You look lonely. I can fix that.
Okay. So in the title, I've written Metaphysical Curiosity and Meta-Emotional States. And so first, I'm going to speak about metaphysics. Actually, in order to speak about it, we got to talk about philosophy. And the best way to explain philosophy is first understand what the word means, which is the love of wisdom, literally philosophia. And so we can say that human beings were opened their eyes in a world and they had questions, and the pursuit of these questions is really philosophy. Now, the word metaphysics, even though I'm going to explain philosophy here, the word metaphysics comes from Aristotle. This is important. I'll get into this, but first I need to show the audience. Okay, so if people look at the video, if the viewers look at the screen of the video, you will see a picture I'm putting there. And so this picture explains philosophy, and I would say the branches. So if philosophy was a tree, it's very important to be aware of this. So these are the branches of the tree. So we have, in some sense, one branch of philosophy being ethics, what is of value, that means right and wrong, morality. We have a branch of philosophy being aesthetics, what is beauty, that means in some sense the relationships of our mind with the sensory world. We have logic, How do we reason? Logic has to do with information accumulation and also memory. That means if a person's memory is affected, their whole logic or system of approach to the moment is affected. Then we go to political philosophy. How should societies be governed? Epistemology, how do we know? And then we have metaphysics, what is real? So it's very important to keep these in mind. Let me see if what's a way we can simplify these. Ethics has to do with right and wrong, aesthetics, beauty, logic, reason. Political philosophy is government. Epistemology, knowledge. And metaphysics, reality. These are the various universes. Now, metaphysics is a branch of philosophy. That means if a person comes and says, "Hey, I'm a spiritual person," people will be like, "Hey, buddy, does it look like we're spirits right now?" But if someone comes and says, "Hey, man, I had a metaphysical experience," then people will know how to, at least in academic circles, there would be a way to position experiences beyond that which is real, in a delicate way at least. So if anybody out there in the world, they're calling themselves spiritual, you can simultaneously say you have an interest in the metaphysical branch of philosophy. Imagine the person in the Mount Shasta area in the New Age community is someone who's like channeling, who feels they're channeling extraterrestrials or something. There's people like that in the New Age community. And so imagine if you wanted to philosophically say that you're like doing that, you would be like, "I'm having a relationship." Actually, I need to explain the three branches of metaphysics before I get into that, but it's like, okay, so this is where I got to talk about Aristotle, actually. So the word metaphysics, guys, which is really the essence of this episode. First of all, meta means after, and physics comes from physis in ancient Greece, which means nature. So metaphysics means after nature, and the concept actually, how we know the concept is from Aristotle. And Aristotle, Socrates, Plato, how we know about them is from a hidden library that was found. So our records of Aristotle, Socrates, and Plato, they're limited to just certain literary findings. But Aristotle, in which he wrote physics, he first wrote a book on physics, nature, and then his second book was called Metaphysics. But the title of his second book was so profound that it became a branch of philosophy since ancient times. Excuse me. So, metaphysics. Now, depending on history, throughout history, of course, people should know this. No idea is fixed. Every person that comments on an idea adds to the dimensions of that idea. So we can say, it doesn't matter if you're an artist or you're a chef and you're trying to advance that domain or field. Or for example, one wants to, pretty much what it is we're creatures of attention, and we can literally zoom in and out of things. And when we zoom in on things, it becomes specific. When we zoom out, it becomes general. And if you notice, Even in the branches of philosophy, it's like that. You know, from the specifics of reality, where there's reason, you can say, where oh my god, I can't even say it, aesthetics, where aesthetics is concerned. You know, but anyways, there's a picture I need to show people here. So guys, I can't find the picture, but I will tell you. Pretty much there's two branches to metaphysics. There is general metaphysics and there's specific metaphysics. General metaphysics is called ontology, and if I was to define ontology for you, aside from just the study of being, the specific. Here, check this out. Ontology is the branch of philosophy that studies concepts such as existence, being, becoming, and reality. You could say the big questions are ontological. The small questions are epistemological, which means it's more our theory from the small sensory range of access. That means it's like if you can say general metaphysics is like the big, wondering about the big and the small, and in some sense specific metaphysics is wondering about the small and the big. Specific metaphysics, I would say, I mean, that's a way of defining it. I wouldn't say that's an absolute, but the three categories are in some sense, let me see if I remember, it's cosmology, we're wondering about the cosmos, our relationship with the cosmos. We're wondering about rational psychology. That means, in some sense, our relationship with ourselves and what we see. That means reason and the psyche, pretty much wondering about that relationship. And then we have natural theology. You know what it's like? It's like wondering about the individual's role in the cosmos, the individual's role in the local, ethnocentric starting point, and then one's relationship with nature and the divine, I would say. Anyways, there's many ways that the world is being classified. This is the part of the episode where I go more into my perception. So, we find ourselves in a physical universe. The first thing we're engaged with, I have divided this in one book I wrote called The Great Work. Pretty much I divided nature into 3 points: a point where it's of the self, a point where it's about others, and a point where it's about the world. That means I notice that in any moment in nature, if there is conscious individual creaturehood, there's automatically a relationship with other creatures, with the world, and with oneself. This would mean that for the human being, for example, you have a relationship with yourself, the type of your sense of being. You have a relationship with the sense of being of others, and you have a relationship with the sense of being of all that is, right? Now, what do we find in human psychology when the human being is born? The human being that is born is first paying attention to itself. Itself is the most important thing. As the child enters society and understands that there's others, right? Our behaviors and mannerisms shift in accordance to other minds, other realities that are in the world. So there is a relationship with ourself, and then after we have experienced enough of ourself, we become interested in others, I would say. The very young child doesn't really care about others. Even if you look at really young children, they don't even have a psychology to care yet. So after one has in some sense completed or experienced the relationship with themselves, they experience a relationship with others. And when I say others, this goes in regards to both the outer realm and the inner realm. What that means is, here's an example. If I tell you in the outer realm, what's your relationship with yourself, most people will say, my biological body, Mr. Within, And then if I ask people, what's your relationship with yourself in the inner realm, all the gurus who have shunned the ego will raise their hand. So the I thought, the idea of ourself is our inner relationship with ourself. So the ego, right? So when it comes to self, in the outer realm, physical survival to maintain the body, and in the inner realm, the survival of our attention, whether it chooses to, express as an individual thought or otherwise. Now, when it comes to the relationship of others, in our inner realms, the relationship with our others is actually our ego. That means we don't know others. Let's say somebody sees a person outside and they have a judgment on that person in the outer realm, so it becomes something where it's as if we don't know we don't have people's eyes, but that we judge them based on the impression we get, right? Which is incorrect, but it's just that's how society works for now. In the outer realm, our relationship with others is pretty much the concept of tribalism and teamwork. In the future, I will tell you, it's going to be kind of all the human beings on Earth are going to feel like Earth is a spaceship, as Marshall McLuhan and Buckminster Fuller suggest, spaceship Earth, and we're all crew members. So it's as if we are a crew that hasn't realized it's crew yet. When we realize we're crew, everybody's a crew member, If we even take this spaceship analogy further, everybody that's alive is the crew member, and the future generations are the captain and the pilot. In the outer realm, so it's teamwork, the whole spaceship Earth thing. In the inner realms, others are actually our past. So this is something fascinating, you know. That means this is something that the moment I realized, it revolutionized my perception and communication with people, you know. Most people, when they communicate, they feel the other person sees them through their eyes. But when you realize nobody can see your eyes, that the eyes are the private dimension of the universe, you know. A lot of people are afraid of the concept of loneliness, for example, but I will tell you, if you shift the context to solitude and see that it's a private space, a private relationship with the universe, I would say when it comes to the psychology, the inner self, others can be anything. This is why there's deception. There's deception and there's liars in the world, simply because we cannot see each other's inner realms. In a telepathic society, there can be no such thing, for example, as liars. In a society that established collective mind technology, there can be no such thing as suffering of an individual anymore. That means theoretically, if the minds of everybody on the planet was connected to one field, if somebody suffered, we would all feel that suffering. You know, you can kind of even say when in Christianity, Christ spoke about dying for the sins of all mankind. You know, that idea is kind of literally what a collective being would experience. It was as if Christ was so ahead of our time, you know. That means it's in some sense it was as if he had accessed that collective being, right? Because I'm telling you, it's not only me, many scholars in history, many voices in history have pointed to this, that there is another dimension here. So when I talk about one's relationship with others, it's also one's relationship with the visible other and the invisible other. And then we have one's relationship with the world. And when it comes to the world, it also follows the individual, collective, or the visible, invisible model, right? That means a person has a relationship with the world in front of their eyes, which is the laws of physics assist us. And I would say one has a relationship with the inner realms, you know, with the inner world, and that's not the laws of physics, the laws of metaphysics, the principles of metaphysics. When it comes to working with your mind is like a pond. Any rock you throw ripples. That means everything I am saying right now, I notice their echo, you know. That means it's like there's no way a person can say a bunch of words after one another and not have the images infused, you know, the images eventually infused. So you can say in Mr. Within's geometrical explanations of reality, I drew it as the inverted triangle inside a circle and a circle inside an inverted triangle. And so in my book, The Great Work, which is a very strange book, I wouldn't recommend people to buy it actually, because it's not like it's more like an artifact than a. But anyways, the left brain hemisphere has this trio complex first, and then accesses the simplicity of nature. The right brain hemisphere is being everything. So that means it's as if left brain, three dimensions, right brain hemisphere, one dimension. As if nature first, then what's in it. Other part of the brain is like what's here first, then nature, you know. So technically there is 6 relationships here. I'm gonna write them here. There is the invisible self again, and the visible self, There is the visible other, the invisible other, and the visible other. There's the visible world, excuse me, the invisible world and the visible world. Now, physics, or that which is before metaphysics, our conclusions of it, can be said that it has shape, it has color, it has dimension, but it's also changing all the time. So what we call a world actually doesn't exist, but a giant changing system where energy is transforming in endless ways is taking place, you know. So guys, my attention has come to the chat section. Welcome everyone. Jamie says, you're my favorite meta philosopher. That's an incredible way, you know. You're kind of making me feel bad for saying philosopher this whole time. But yeah, I would say a meta philosopher is an individual that has surpassed the question and answer game. Because philosophy is concerned with the questions of existence. That means it's as if the eyes have opened and we're like, what's going on here, you know? And I would say science is a method which gives an answer, provides an answer, but it doesn't account for the experience we're having. You know, it's as if the world is multidimensional, science is explaining a certain dimension of it, but all the other dimensions we do not know what to do with it. You know, and believe it or not, like, if there is a truth underneath, there is a truth underneath speech, guys. You know, that really, even Ludwig Wittgenstein suggested this: the limits of my language are the limits of my world. The physics of our reality, what we find in the outer realms, in the inner realms, is contained through language, and it is contained through subjective symbolism. You know, so symbols are really just, you know, it's as if somebody is, imagine somebody with a sword, you know, hits that sword to a wall and it creates one line. And somebody was like, there we go, the number one. You know, it's as if it was just, you can totally see the spontaneous origin. They call these universals. Okay, universals means things that are, regardless of the person's inner realms, it's the same for everyone. Like the color blue is a universal. Like consciousness is a universal. That means literally there can be no human being without consciousness. It's like, even if we have the human idea, we're like, where's the human idea? You know, Friedrich Nietzsche, in his work, he shares this idea that if a tree falls in a forest and there's nobody to hear it, did the tree fall? And it's the same way of saying, if there were no eyes open in the world, to who would there be a world? There wouldn't even be the concept of the world without consciousness. So we realize, at least from this, we can recognize that language, which we use to translate physical reality into a story, in some sense cannot access the direct experiential dimensions of reality. So pretty much, I would, if I was to, in a simple way, explain physics and metaphysics, it's pretty much what we know and what we don't know. And if the physical universe is being known through consciousness, this physical reality, then it's like unknown states of it are beyond metaphysics. That means metaphysics, believe it or not, is not for a human. It surpasses human ideology. That means, philosophers have to be careful that even though, as Aristotle suggests, there was the first cause of philosophy, which was theology, and then the second cause, a sort of philosophy that is not limited to the will of nature. There's this thing that certain tribes back in the day, you can imagine like someone living in the forest, a hunter, and this hunter would put his palm on the ground and he would hear the hooves of buffalo or something. Do you know what I mean? He would sense, the movement in the realm. And so I feel that it's like when they tell, anybody who's been told to meditate, it's like if you truly meditate, it would be the same, but you're feeling the movements of the whole moment rather than just a part of it. By the way, something that I should have said at first, anybody who wants to ask a question in the chat section, in brackets, write in context to, and then write whatever it is about, and then ask the question. That way, it's a more efficient way of responding. I could totally be challenged right now, in the sense that I could just, if I was listening to my own talk, I would come and say, hey, Mr.Within, if we're using physics to understand what is beyond physics, how can that even be possible? That means someone could come and tell me, Mr.Within, why are you even speaking if metaphysics is a suggestion that beyond language there's reality? The reason we speak and we communicate is a humanistic reason. That means I know the less behind the eyes, the invisible, the inner self of people, the less it feels human, the less we need language. Language is a human, civilized, you can say, behavior, right? It's an organized behavior, right? If we forget that we're humans and everybody feels they're God, or everybody feels like they're aliens, it's as if it's like it suddenly language doesn't make sense anymore, so language is kept to the human identity because we have mouths and because we have ears. You can even say hypothetically, in the future, imagine an extraterrestrial species lands down and all the world leaders are there to greet it, and this extraterrestrial species lands, but they don't have ears and they don't have mouths, imagine, right? So then all our philosophers would be like, and all our meta-philosophers would be like, okay, how do we talk to this creature, and so imagine at that point humanity brings in mystics and yogis, and they sit there meditating, and in their inner realms they see simulations of what the extraterrestrials are saying, or the extraterrestrials give us like some technology that is like a screen, so whatever they're thinking is just shown as an image on that screen or whatever. Anyways, let's go back to the topic. So we have physics, our sensory experiences. We have metaphysics, you can say metasensory experiences. Guys, the word meta is so useful, A person who gets fired, they could say, meta, my meta work. Pretty much we find strategies for individual efficiency. I'm a good example of someone who needs to find strategies for individual. So yeah, there's the self, the visible self. Pretty much it's just accumulation. That means an advanced civilization, rather than individuals going towards it, would be a civilization that would go towards the people. You know what it is? The world can be seen through many dimensions, and in all of those dimensions there's a possibility. I look at my biological existence and I'm like, yeah, my body's existing here now. And all human beings know there will come a time where we will actually be just a memory in existence. Let's say we had technology right now, and let's say the universe was finite. That means it has a edge. And let's say that we used our technology and we managed to completely scan and index all the dimensions of the observable universe physically. That means we had understood everything to do with our senses in the outer realms. We had explored all that light authorizes for perception. After we have known the physical realm, only the beyond the physical remains. That means it's as if all the scientific method, if the universe was finite, would inevitably be led to the metaphysical. So you know what it is? It's kind of like as Jamie in the chat section suggested, meta-philosophers. It's like meta-philosophers are ahead of the line. It's like meta-philosophers are the future selves of scientists. Because once the observable is complete, it's just like, let's say, real estate. You know, a person goes into sees one room, sees the other room, sees all the rooms, and then sees outside of the house. You know, we are seeing all the observable dimensions in our perception, then going towards the unobservable. That means all those people on the planet who are like, I want to learn, I want to know more. It's like after you have known everything, let's say all the greatest teachers on the planet had given you their lesson, imagine, and you had them access all the information, even the information in cyberspace, and you knew everything. At the edge of all knowledge is the unknown. That means God, it's like God or the divine is the unknown, and knowledge is the ignorance. And at least from a theological standpoint, the forbidden fruit was knowledge. So man attained the knowledge, at least to my understanding of the Abrahamic tradition. In some sense, it was like how we see, for example, in Adam and Eve, they have leaves around their private regions, you know, around their genitalia. So it's like, at least I know this. Pretty much after eating the apple, it was as if a sort of desire was born into man, and the sin was that desire. You know, it's as if the eyes have seen something and they can no longer unsee it. You know. You know, there in Abrahamic thought, in religious thought, there's also this idea that when God created man, one of God's angels, which is such a strange concept because the angels can only follow the will of God, one of God's angels in some sense challenges God, and in some sense doesn't bow to the archetype of man, because in the, I would say, Abrahamic tradition, pretty much man is kind of made of clay from God, and God imbues man with life from his breath. And when he does that, after man becomes alive, God commands commands man to recite all the names, all the celestial names, the divine names, which is another way of saying God gives man a mind. So, you know, the clay is the body, and the names that man has to repeat in front of the angels in heaven where God created man, in the religious context, it's like that is the mind. So in some sense, God imbues man with an ultimate body, an ultimate mind. You know, this clay, it suddenly has a mind. Then all the angels bow except one of the angels, and then the whole show starts, you know. So here's the thing I wanted to say actually. After one of the angels doesn't bow to the creation of man, evidently, I'm not certain of this, but I've heard of this idea, that there is a passage that in some sense, I don't know if this is in all the Abrahamic traditions, but in some sense it's a passage where it's as if the angel that doesn't bow looks at God and says, why create a creature that brings destruction? Do you know? Something of this sort. And so I would say through a very theologically puzzling angle, it's as if there is no such thing as the concept of the devil. Do you know? And there is no such thing as Adam. There is only God. Do you see? That's the true religious, I would say, view, at least in how far I've felt, you know, because it's not the religious ideology It's the religious experience where this is why there's an emphasis, for example, on faith. Because it's an inner structure, you know? It's as if the religions are portals to a collective experience. And people are fighting over how the portals look rather than realizing the destination is the same. As Swami Krishnananda says, religion is God remembering himself. That means the holy man, the religious pious man who's praying, suddenly in the middle of his prayer, he's like, what am I doing? And realizes it is all nature. You see, the clue, the biggest clue in the religious, in all literary religious outlets or portals, how would I say? It's as if, let's say, after the concept of God, and let's say after the experience that underlies the concept of God, it's as if the second sign of a collective being, that means if somebody was like Mr.Within, let's say aside from the concept of God and aside from the concept of nature, what other collective being do you see on this planet? I would say ideology. To me, there is something strange. You know, there is people possessing ideas and ideas possessing people. That means subjects that are limiting the objective experience and objective experiences that are limiting our subjective freedom. In the chat section, there's questions. Jeff says, do you all feel the change in this planet? I mean, are the reason we have I would say feelings are described as the effect to something. It's our reaction to the effect of a situation, you know. That means a soccer player kicks a soccer ball. It's like an event that is caused. The ball is about to go to the net, and the soccer player doesn't know if it's going to go in or not, and suddenly when the ball goes inside, it's a certain result. The soccer ball is counted as a goal, and the soccer player suddenly gets emotional and super happy and cheerful, as if the emotion is a response to the circumstance or to how the moment goes forth. So I would say the reason we have feelings is because the planet is changing. So if one becomes aware of their emotion, they are noticing the planetary change, which that is a very, I would say, profound view. Kushbu says, meta-philosophy of present have a glimpse of God's plan for the future. Are we feeling the glimpses of what's approaching beyond Mr.Within's talks? Of course, I don't think this is a question for me to answer, but I will tell you that it's all language. Right now, imagine 8 billion human beings inside a balloon. A linguistic simulation. At some point, this balloon will pop and the species will realize that our nature is multidimensional. Multidimensionality is where the concept of freedom comes. That means the first, I would say, one of the earliest signs of multidimensionality is duality. That means I would say duality is between the singular and the multidimensional. And so what that means is that I say it like this. I say singularity is the mother of duality. Duality is the father of infinity. Infinity is the mother of the void. And the void I would say, is the father of the singular. The God that is everywhere, omnipresent, as if the only thing that could be omnipresent is the space where everything is in, right? And of course, in theology, there are different perspectives. I will tell you, there's one perspective where God is everywhere all the time, and it's like all of matter is like a glove for this unknown divine intelligence. Another view is that the universe was created by God, and God, in some sense, is watching over it, but God is not in the universe. So it's like in the universe where like only man is here, but it's as if outside of the universe. How about there? And outside of the universe, man is not a self to even be able to fathom the question. So what's remarkable in the pursuit of the ultimate knowledge is the recognition that as you get closer and closer to the sun, your individualism stops. In some sense, is in some sense, what's the term? Is being dissolved by the pressures of truth. You see, guys, there is free will, which means a person can pilot their moment. Let's say a person's free will is absent, and if their free will is absent, what happens? The ecosystem, the environment pilots the person. Right? So the option is we choose who we are, or if we don't choose who we are, the world goes forth and it chooses for us, This is why the poet Rumi says, wherever you are, be the soul of that moment. Right now I'm given a podcast. It's like I have no choice other than to be the soul. And so metaphysical curiosity arises when enough of the physical has been known. That means and I'll tell you something fascinating. I think this is a common trend. I think a lot of people who go towards spirituality, it arises to them simply because of the weight of an incident in life. That means something shows the person that there is more than their free will here. Aside from epigenetical influence, which means cultural, social, political, and beyond. There's something I want to show. You see, if you were to say all of knowledge is categorization of image, that means pretty much to be a knowledgeable person means to know how ideas can be managed in a worldview. Where's this picture? These 6 branches, guys, entail the world. And I feel that all of them, aside from metaphysics, are inside the sphere of consciousness, and metaphysics is outside of the sphere. And if one steps outside of the sphere of their consciousness, it's another way of saying you're leaving your past. That means metaphysics, spirituality, mysticism, this is for people who have reached a point in their life where they want to become acquainted with the unknown. Not through image, not through, to be honest, something upset me when I realized esoteric societies are playing costume games with the divine. It has nothing to do with our actions or ceremonial Brahmanism. It has to do with the sort of ceremonial attitude as they had during Brahmin times. I would say it's more like every person has a resonance, and you can call it their decency resonance. It's their simplest self's acceptance of everything. Once you access that, you will take strides in, I would say, poetically, in your spiritual evolution faster than any sort of artificial ceremonial theater. I will tell you, the point of life is that where your attention goes, that's where the information of the world comes from. That means if somebody thinks about a beautiful world, they're gonna wake up and be like, yo, why is everything so beautiful? You know, it's like the context is there. You know, if somebody thinks of a world where everything doesn't work out, then it's like, that's the type of energy they're cultivating. It's like people don't treat it as if, you know, it's as if every person has a DNA, unique DNA, and at the same time, every person is an energetic being, and so it's as if we have not mastered the martial energy arts of our, you know, DNA, you know. That means the best way to kind of, I would say, access thought is to discriminate between the inner realms and the outer realms. Guys, it took me a very long time to figure this out, so to be able to say it this easily, but behind your eyes is metaphysical. In front of your eyes is physical. Now the question comes, what is witnessing both to be able to see them as codependent? That means it's as if a person who knows what the archetype of good is and what the archetype of bad is, how can you be good or bad when you know both of them? In the inner realms, the information doesn't personalize, but in the outer realms it does. And you know why in the inner realms it doesn't personalize? Because when people think about themselves, the thought directly comes. They don't think about it, their subjective character. That means it's like when somebody says apple, for example, somebody says the word apple, and in your inner realms you hear the sound apple, and a picture of an apple comes. You see, just the picture of the apple comes. The picture of you holding an apple doesn't come, perhaps. Do you see? So the object comes independent. The internal object is independent of our archetypal self, or can be. And just because it can be, that just instantly means, in some sense, in the inner realms, there's a sort of demigod freedom. You know. So what I'm saying is it's like the human body. Sure, we're individual embodiments, but in the behind our eyes, I would say it's a field. You know, behind the person's eyes, the person can consider themselves to be anything. One thing that I theorized, which I feel is a very unique approach, but I had this realization one day that who I'm being now, just like how in this moment right now I'm talking, I remember my past. Sometimes I think, what if right now in my present, my future self is remembering me? So the metaphysical can be intelligent through the self, the other, or the world. So what that means is the self is appearing as human, the other is that which is non-human, you could say robotic or extraterrestrial or transcendental. And then when it comes to the world, it's as if we finish our curiosity for ourself. It's like been there, done that. Then we finish our curiosity with others, been there, done that. Then our curiosity comes to the big picture, which is the sort of global situation that the species is in. And then beyond the world, like, you know, it's as if it's waiting for us to literally, you know how they say businesses create jobs? It's as if exploration creates new concepts. And so 8 billion minds should not just learn the past, but they should explore the future. If the species begins this explorer mindset, it surpasses being a philosopher, being a this or that, or, you know, the ideological games are pushed aside, and the true era of advanced communication begins. That means imagine teachers in the future, they will be like generals, you know? They will be like generals waiting to see, trying to recruit people in the most intense ideological battles. Not a physical war, you know? Just pretty much humanity's relationship with the unknown, giving us the permission to make the impossible possible. So guys, I found a picture that incredibly depicts how philosophy has evolved until now, you know? So, you see the difference? Back in the day, there was a fascination in trying to survive as just like, you know what it is? There's a sort of physical survival, like the movie Castaway, where your body is in like an island, stuck on an island. Then there's the mind, consciousness in an endless universe. Do you see? So the survival of consciousness in the endless universe was the birth of the philosopher. Everybody should be asking the question of where am I? What am I? Why is everyone here? And then as a retaliation to those questions, live and in some sense try to advance civilization, because what else can we do? What's the point of all of our ancestors building civilization so far? So we could feel depressed in it? You know, it's the most meaningless kind of attitude, you know? It's as if we are, you know what it is? It's as if we have been given an incredible, like, King Arthur level sword, but the human species has not realized it's like a swordsman in battle against cosmic forces, you know? So if the viewers look at the video wallpaper again. Okay, so let's go through this. So in this diagram, it's a roadmap to metaphysics. In the right corner, you'll see it says subjects which relate to metaphysics. It says logic and philosophical logic. I mean that the issue with philosophical logic is it's kind of like logic is a logical approach to the unknown, but the unknown is not logical. So the philosophy of logic is solipsism, and then the philosophy it's a solipsistic approach. Then we have the philosophy of language. That's a very important field. Philosophy of mind is a very important field. And guys, logic is a very important field, but it's a field that really relates more to the outer realm consequence than the inner realm freedom for the mind to change at any time. You know, so then we have the philosophy of mind, which has to do with, you can say Carl Jung's helped in that category. We have phenomenology, which is perception, and you know, to be honest, it comes to the experience of the brain. We have the philosophy of religion, man's relationship with the universal unknown intelligence, and then we have the philosophy of science. And the philosophy of science is another way of saying is like science is like, you know what it is? It's like the older brother. Philosophy is the older brother of science. So, you know, science can raise its voice, but the older brother just stares and sort of... So anyways, so here, the metaphysics, it says particular types of metaphysics, descriptive, revisionary. Okay, so to continue, guys, sorry, that was an interruption. So, branches in metaphysics, yay! You know, so monoism and pluralism, pretty much the idea of the individual and the collective. I'll hold on to ontology for now. It says identity, personal identity. This is pretty much how we create, how what we have seen so far is kind of like the accumulated information we use to extract an identity, a sort of response to the moment. A person, if a person, let's say there's somebody is a statue, like let's say how would I say? There was this show where the characters were suddenly frozen into time like a statue. And so if the person never moved, there would be no identity. So identity arises in a dynamic state. That means a person sitting silent and still has no identity. When the person moves, they have identity from an observation on the psychology, right? That means when it's like what I'm saying is like, it's like when we wake up, that's consciousness. Then we go to sleep, deep sleep, that's unconsciousness. And imagine a spectrum of different states between it. Pretty much it's a dynamic state, that's all I'm saying. Then we go to the next, which we have causation, and then we have space and time. So here I disagree with this, the way the person's drawn the branch here. draw, space and time, appearance and reality. I would keep those two as branches of causation, because the concept of space, time, even the whatever we see in reality has to have a cause. So guys, even though you're seeing in the diagram the last two right arrows of the first horizontal line of the upper horizontal line, the last two arrows should be branching out from causation, So because causation is inner and outer, science ignores the outer, and science ignores the inner, and religion ignores the outer. That's why, theists and atheists are destined to be best friends, So now we go to ontology, the study of true being. So here it divides to abstract objects, which means internal realm, inner realm phenomena. Then we have intentional objects, phenomenology. Phenomenology means it's like how we move and we see something appears to exist, and how the world is moving and something is existing. So phenomenology, I would say, has two divisions, two more branches here. And then we go to the mind and body, and then the concept of God. The concept of God means the unknown is 100% moving the known. The concept of the mind and body means like 50%. God 50%, 50% known, 50% unknown. And something that is only done through the domain of consciousness would be just like I'm telling you, like intelligence is not just image-based or linear. That means our logic in any moment is limited to the variables, That means imagine the person orders pizza for like 5 people, and then like 5 more people show up, So it becomes a situation where the person was being very logical. There were only 5 people in the room. They ordered pizza for 5 people, But they didn't have the information that there was new people gonna join, and so the food would not be enough. Do you see? So when there's unknown variables, it doesn't matter how perfect our logic and reasoning is. It's just factors that we don't know yet. And once they come into the domain of our consciousness through our exploration of the world, as if the light of humanity in front of its eyes is from the sun, behind its eyes it's from the inner sun, from the self. It's as if our eyes are the link between the self and the world. Sight is pretty much that. Sight is a bridge between everything, and it's like the center of a sphere with the circumference. That means right now, everything I'm seeing is literally, my sight is what's between me and the world, So here the categories go to predication, philosophy of language, logic. I mean, here's the thing. The reason I would say logic falls under the philosophy of language is because mathematics, which gives us the idea of a step-by-step phase or a progression, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it doesn't matter, it's like step 1, step 2, step 3, 4, whatever sort of route the person's psychology takes. Mathematics is actually a language to some when it comes to the philosophy of mathematics, which in the future I will definitely dedicate episodes to. I think from a year from now I will probably really get into the philosophy of mathematics, but and so I would say logic is our response to the outer realms, and imagination is literally the irrational. That means if you logically wanted to figure out the imagination, it is the absence of logic. You see, because logic is only known variables, the imagination has an unknown possibility. Like right now in front of my eyes, I can just hold this cup in my hand, but if I was to just not move my hand and close my eyes in my inner realms, I could see that cup flying into the air and trying to go beyond the atmosphere. You see, the imagination provides for an internal shift of the world and its image and its geometry, but the outer realms, it's more fixed. So the outer realms is more, hilariously, is more selfish than the inner realms. So I would say the physical universe is like the witness within. So here's the thing: it's like the soul is the oldest brother, or oldest sister, and then the second is like the oldest brother and the sister. Sorry, the mind is like the second oldest brother or sister, and then the third is the body is like the youngest sibling. So what that means is that it's like 3 onion layers, and inside the onion layer is empty, and outside of the onion layer it's empty, right? So what that means is like inside the body, like through scientific reports, it has been suggested 99.9% of the atom is empty, and I think that 1% is just the shape of it that we know. That means in some sense it's when I say empty, it's not empty, it's probably like potential, you know. And so whoever made this diagram, I mean, like, it was definitely a great effort, but the branches are different. And the advantage we have is that we're not a civilization of clones, right? If we all want one truth, we would all be clones. But because we're all different, that's the greatest advantage. It's as if even though there's overpopulation, there's at the same time 8 billion opportunities of 8 billion problem solvers, 8 billion types of multidimensional intelligent observance of reality, and then it's engagement. Oh my god, guys, this was on mute and I was just reading on. The moment we close our eyes, whoever is listening to me right now, just close your eyes for a moment. And if you can see something, the question comes, what is seeing without light? That means try this out, whoever's listening. Just close your eyes and just for a moment, just visualize, remember something yesterday or imagine something or whatever, and then wonder about whatever you're imagining, who is looking at it. That means if I said to the listeners, imagine, for example, a blue glowing cube, or I don't know, let's say, or a golden sphere, and imagine this golden sphere kind of just like hovering in the air a meter above you, and keep your eyes closed while you're imagining. And if you successfully have imagined it, now ask yourself who is seeing that imagination when your eyes are closed. And again, there is the absence of light, right? So now that I've kind of painted that picture of like, you ask that question, who, that's where you go beyond the language threshold in the inner ones. And beyond the language threshold, I don't want to say it's just automated, but I would say the eyes of our eyes cannot fear, but these eyes have seen. Metaphysics is all about the journey of conscious sight in the void, where infinity is a possibility. Is how bizarre is that? We're literally in a world where not only the mathematics suggests the concept of infinity, but we can't see the edge of our goddamn sky, or our, God bless the sky, I find it pretty cool, actually. On some level, sure, I'm just this random podcaster, but on another, I feel like we're all in an universal unknown event. We're all passengers of the experience of the outer realms. And I have this view that man was born on Earth, but he wasn't designed to die here. That means the Earth is beautiful, but after we have seen it all, the only thing left is to go beyond, right? What else can an inquisitive animal do, right? The only reason we have been surviving the fittest until now is simply because animal saw a better strategy and took it. Back in the day, the better strategy was to like be a savage. The most violent animal was victorious. Like there was a reason the lion was the king of the jungle. In modern times, I would say it's not about the victory of the individual. You know, it's not about a civilization that is judging its own citizens by their ability. It's as if the person wants to do good, but rather than going and helping every individual, the person's like, I'm just gonna help the world that all individuals are in. You see, it's a sort of detour to greatness. That means the person's like, if I help the world, then everybody in the world is helped, you know. We have to spark the inventive spirit. We have to aspire towards a global renaissance. I've called it the multidimensional renaissance. That means that we have never had a global event of a creative vision. Do you know? That means it's as if some people feel if people stop doing anything, the world would be at peace. But I will tell you, the world is in as many pieces as we break it up into. You know, the poet Rumi, he shares this next level mystical imagery where he says God is like a mirror, and this mirror has shattered, and every person who has a soul, there is like a little piece of the mirror reflecting the truth of the You know, guys, I'll just shift the listener's attention to these final ideas, and then I'll end off the episode. And I'll be on Discord for those interested who have questions about the episode. But pretty much, I'm saying we have been living in a world where it has had a very strange history. The more we go back in history, even though human beings were more savage, more wild, more cruel, but they were also way more multidimensional. In ancient Greece, people looked at the skies and like, imagine you were born in ancient Greece and you'd be like, yo, gods are walking up above those clouds, you know? Or if you were a fisherman in ancient Greece, you would be like, yo, Poseidon, you got my back, right? You know, and you know? So in some sense, people had a metaphysical relationship with reality, and that metaphysical relationship was an experiential relationship with the unknown. Now, in this modern times, because in the outer realms, society is capitalizing on people's desires. So in the inner realms, most people, when they enter the inner realms, because in the outer realms, they're so desire-filled, in the inner realms, they will be desire-filled, and that actually limits one's cultivation of wisdom. And let me tell you why. Because when somebody finds something new, they want to understand it. So there's something I gotta say, and this is very important in inner piloting, that sometimes what the world needs, or let's say what an ignorant system needs, is tools of clarity. You know, what that means is that in all the ways, it's like the world is set in a certain, how would I say it? It's as if all of knowledge is an alphabet of image. giant alphabet of knowledge. And from this alphabet of concepts, imagine a dictionary of just all the concepts ever. You know, let's say the first conceptual dictionary is made by a very advanced AI in the future. All of the human conception is just in this one gigantic book, with the really small, readable letters, you know. And so imagine in the future, there's just going to be one book that teaches everything, you know, but it's going to be such a big book that it's like, this book has how many chapters? It's like, oh, so, you know, 7 million chapters. No, I'm joking. All of knowledge can be communicated through image, or it can be communicated through sentence structure. A person can limit themselves to sentence structure, then try to perceive images, or a person can see the image, then in some sense evoke the language. And so anyways, guys, thanks for listening, and I hope this episode was helpful. Actually, before I end off, I gotta say something about meta-emotional states. So if earlier I was saying an emotion is our, you can say, let's say for now, our reaction to the effect of something that was caused in our moment. So what that means is, again, imagine the soccer player analogy. So the soccer player kicks the ball, causes something, and the ball goes in the net, and then there's a result, and that result to me is like an achievement, and there's emotion. Our eyes are the source of language. They are like the first, you know what it is? It's as if like everything I say is just shape in a realm with endless shapes. You know, it's hilarious. We're living at a time in 2021 where the future is forgotten. People, their past causes them suffering, you know, causes them depression, and the future causes them anxiety. And so we want to, in some sense, forget the past, and we don't want the future to arrive, and we just want to find ourselves in an eternal moment thinking that is enlightenment. But I will tell you, the future, it's as if the most genius thing that the human mind can do is enlist the service of all past information to serve future exploration. That means I would say the purpose of knowledge is for the evolution of the question, of all questions. You know? Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. I hope this episode was helpful. Honestly.